This Sikha is both connected to a pasuk in this week's Parsha, as well as a siyum on Masechta Megillah. In this week's Parsha, we have the pasuk, Zois HaTorah Odom Ki Yomuz Ba'oil. These are the laws if a person passes away in a tent. But these words, Zois HaTorah Odom, could also be understood, and Chazal learn out that we have the idea that the Torah, in a certain sense, is similar to the Odom, to the human being, or the human being similar to the Torah. So we have a Gemara in the end of Masechta Megillah, which also speaks in some ways about the connection between the person himself and the Torah, and also in the context of someone passing away. Rab Parnoch says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, this is the end of the Gemara Megillah, Kol ha'oicha Sefer Torah arum, someone that holds a Sefer Torah, where it's uncovered, it's not in a cloth, he's holding the parchment, touching the parchment directly, Nikbar arum, he ends up being buried uncovered himself. The Gemara says, arum salkadayat, you think it actually means buried without any clothes? The Gemara says, rather it means without mitzvahs, buried naked without mitzvahs. Then the Gemara says, below mitzvah salkadayat, do you think it means he gets buried without any mitzvahs? So rather, Abaye says, Nikbar Arum, it means he gets buried without that particular mitzvah, which we'll soon see in the Sikha what that means. But the Rebbe is starting off the Sikha on the premise that if the Gemara gives different svaris, different ways of how we may have thought something, it's not the Gemara is stam bringing this. Surely each one of these thoughts in the Gemara, these initial thoughts of the Gemara, each one represent a certain way of looking and understanding what's going on over here. So this is what the Rebbe wants to discuss. So simply we could say that the first svara of the Gemara when it says Nikvar Arum is because of the idea of Midah Keneged Midah. Since the person is compared to a Sefer Torah, so if he holds a Sefer Torah undressed, he ends up getting buried undressed. Why is the Gemara not happy with this way of looking at it? Because who is the punishment for if he's getting buried undressed? That's a punishment for the body. But the comparison to a Sefer Torah is mainly to the neshama. So therefore the punishment should have been something to do with the neshama. And therefore the Gemara says it means buried without mitzvahs. On this, the Gemara would ask, so why is he losing all his mitzvahs? And then Abaye says, no, he's just losing that mitzvah. But the Rebbe is not happy with this way of looking at it, because if that's the case, the question should have primarily been for the fact that he's being buried, because without clothes, that's going to be a punishment just on the guf. So what should the Gemara have said? Nikvar arum salkadayat. You think he's buried without clothes? That's only for the guf. But from the wording of the Gemara, it says that the question is not about who is being buried, that burying is only for the guf. The Gemara doesn't say the word nikvar. The Gemara says, arum salkadayat, you think it's naked? That means the question is more, what exactly does naked mean? And therefore, the Rebbe wants to understand the Gemara in a different way. But first, the Rebbe discusses that last statement of the Gemara, that it means he's buried arum below a mitzvah, naked without that mitzvah. So in Tosfos we have two ways of looking at it. Yesh Mefarshim, the first explanation is, it means which mitzvah is he losing out? The mitzvah of holding the Sefer Torah. So Tosfos says this seems to be a problem. What would be the chiddush in that? Obviously he doesn't get reward for that mitzvah of holding the Sefer Torah. He wasn't holding it properly. Therefore, Riva comes along and explains it's referring to the mitzvah that he was doing at the time he was holding the Sefer Torah like that. So, for example, if he was holding the Sefer Torah uncovered and he's learning or reading in the Sefer Torah, then he doesn't get the reward for reading in the Sefer Torah. If he's holding the Sefer Torah to be goylel the Sefer Torah, to roll the Sefer Torah, or to check over and fix the Sefer Torah, he doesn't get the reward for that. And then Tosfos finishes off with in a positive note and with a bracha. But if he holds it in the cloth, oirech yamim bimina, long life is on the right side, besmoiloi shavachaved, and richness on the left side. Richness and honor on the left side. So the Rebbe asks, number one, what are these two svaros in Tosfos itself? Whether it's referring to the mitzvah of holding the Sefer Torah or the mitzvah of learning the Sefer Torah that he was doing at the time. And secondly, why is Tosfos suddenly finishing off with this idea of if he holds it with the cloth, oirech yamim bimina, etc.? How is that relevant over here? Says the Rebbe, the explanation of all of this is that really these three stages in the Gemara, these three svaros or opinions of the Gemara, are really three ways of how we understand the geder, the idea, of the mitpachas of the cloth of the Sefer Torah. How do we define it? One way of understanding it is that the mitpachas, the covering of the Sefer Torah, is not relevant, it's not negei, it's not important for the Sefer Torah itself. It's something completely additional to the Sefer Torah. It's only for the person to hold the Sefer Torah. A second way of understanding it is that it's actually relevant to the Sefer Torah itself. In other words, it's not only about the person holding the Sefer Torah, how he holds it, or it's not only about a negative, that it's not nice to hold the Sefer Torah uncovered, but rather it's something more in the Sefer Torah itself. The object of the Sefer Torah itself demands for its honor, in a positive way, that it should have this covering. A third way of looking at it is it's not only honor for the Sefer Torah, but that the cloth becomes like part of the Sefer Torah itself. Because of the Kedusha of the Sefer Torah, the cloth is now like part of the Sefer Torah, similar to the margins around the columns in the Sefer Torah are part of the Sefer Torah. Says that these are the three svaras in the Gemara. According to the first svara, that the cloth is something completely additional to the Sefer Torah, so then when the person is being buried, he's also being buried without his clothes, which is something completely additional to him, completely separate from him. According to the second svara, that the cloth is actually very much connected and important for the Sefer Torah itself. It's very much, in a certain sense, to do with the Sefer Torah. So then what the person loses out is mitzvahs. What are mitzvahs? The mitzvahs are the person's garments, but what kind of garments are they? These are garments that are mamish connected very much to the neshama and very much to the Torah. The Torah, how does the Torah is all about the halachas of the Torah, and how does it express practically is through the fulfillment of the mitzvahs. For the person, the mitzvahs become very much, it is a lavush, it's a garment for the neshama, but it's very much part of the person. Therefore, since he held it without the mitpachas, according to this understanding, that the mitpachas becomes very much relevant to the Sefer Torah itself, so it's going to be the kind of the garment that the person is going to lose. There's also the mitzvahs that are very much important for the person himself, not like external garments. But according to the maskana of the Gemara, according to the conclusion of the Gemara, that Abaye says it means naked without that mitzvah, this is going to be the third way that the mitpachas, that this cloth is mamish one with the Sefer Torah. It's like as if part of the Sefer Torah itself. And his logic is that you can't say that we're just taking away any other mitzvahs from him, because other mitzvahs, although yes, they are connected and for the honor of the Sefer Torah, but still in some way they're something distinct or separate from the Torah and from the person. They're still levushim, they're still garments. And therefore, he says, Arum beloy me'oisa mitzvah, he says naked without that mitzvah, that means that's referring to the mitpachas itself, the cloth itself, which is mamish part of the Sefer Torah. That's what he's going to lose out. Now, in order to understand this a little bit more, and what are the two ways how Tosfos understands these words, me'oisa mitzvah? So the Rebbe brings a Gemara that speaks about if a person tears kriya for someone that passed away on Shabbos, if he tears kriya on Shabbos for someone that passed away, so even though yes, he was mechalel Shabbos, but he was still yoytz in the mitzvah of kriya. Applying that in our case now, the person may have thought that yes, he was holding the Sefer Torah in an inappropriate way, but seemingly he shouldn't lose out on the actual mitzvah of holding the Sefer Torah. In other words, the aveira that he's doing shouldn't make him lose out on the mitzvah, similar to the person not losing out on the mitzvah of kriya, even though he did it on Shabbos. So this is where the first svara of Tosfos comes in. And he's coming to tell you that no, that in fact you did not do the mitzvah, even though you're holding the Sefer Torah. It's as if you didn't hold the Sefer Torah fully. Why? Because if we said the cloth is mamish part of the Sefer Torah, so it's not the pshat you did a mitzvah and you're also doing an aveira. Since there's no cloth, it's as if there's part of the Sefer Torah itself missing, and therefore you're missing out on the mitzvah of holding a Sefer Torah. That's the first svara of Tosfos. Tosfos, however, is not happy with this pirush, because according to this, the pshat of Arum wouldn't be the pshat of being undressed, being buried undressed, would not be similar to the first two meanings of Arum. Because in the first two meanings, it's more of a punishment. You're taking something away, either his clothes or his mitzvahs, something that he had. But according to this pirush, you're saying he just never did the mitzvah to start with. And therefore comes the second svara of Tosfos. The Rivan says that it means without the mitzvah that you did at the time. In other words, for example, you were learning Torah at the time, so you did the mitzvah of learning, and yet it's going to be taken away, and therefore that's more similar to the first two meanings of the word Arum. The Rebbe now takes these two svaras of Tosfos and looks at it a little bit deeper, that really what they're arguing is to what extent this mitpachas, this cloth, is considered part of the Sefer Torah. According to the first opinion, the cloth will be considered only part of the actual, let's call it the gashmius or the mitzias of the Torah itself. And therefore, it's only connected with the mitzvah of holding the Sefer Torah. But the cloth is not going to be anything to do with anything you're going to do with the Torah as far as what the purpose of Torah is, like learning the Torah, etc. And therefore, according to the first opinion, you can't say that Arum, naked from the mitzvah, means the mitzvah of learning the Torah, because according to this first opinion, yes, the mitpachas is part of the Torah, but not part of the learning of the Torah. But according to the Riva, He takes it a step further and he says that the mitpachas, the cloth, is connected to all aspects, to the whole union of Torah. And therefore, if you're holding it uncovered, there's also a lack in, even when you're learning the Torah, there's a problem, because the mitpachas is connected to every part of the Torah, also the learning of the Torah. It says that, but now we can understand the conclusion of Tosfos, where it says, but if you hold it with the cloth, how does this connect? So the Rebbe is going to look at what mitpachas means beruchnius. Chazal tell us that in this pasuk, we're speaking about two types of people that learn Torah. Those, Yamin is referring to those that learn Torah l'shma, as Rashi explains the Gemara, l'mayminimba. To those that are on the right, Rashi explains it means learning Torah l'shma, they get oirach yamim, and the Gemara says l'masme'ilimba, to those that hold it on the left, or hold it from the left, which Rashi explains meaning shaloi l'shma, they get oisha v'chavod, richness and honor. The Rebbe says, obviously we're not speaking about a person that's learning Torah shaloi l'shma in the most literal sense. Clearly they're not getting oisha v'chavod, richness and honor. We're speaking about a shaloi l'shma in a higher form, a subtle shaloi l'shma. So what does that mean? Learning Torah l'shma would be when you're learning Torah just purely for the sake of learning Torah itself, not even in order to be able to fulfill mitzvahs. The shaloi l'shma that we're talking about over here is you're learning Torah, but in order to be able to help you fulfill the mitzvahs. So it's an important way of learning Torah, a very crucial way. Similar to the mitpacha, similar to the cloth. It's part of Torah. This is a very important part of Torah, to learn it in order to do mitzvahs. But still, compared to the essence of Torah, it's still somewhat of a garment. And therefore, the same thing over here, when we're saying a person is learning Torah, so learning the Torah itself, purely for the Torah, that's like the Torah itself. The cloth is like learning Torah in order to do the mitzvahs. And therefore, Tosfos says that when the person has the cloth, and he also is learning Torah, he has both things. So then, in other words, he's learning Torah both to do the mitzvahs as well as learning Torah just for the sake of Torah itself. Then he has both forms of reward. Till finally, the real Oirech Yam and Oisher V'Chavod, which will be B'vias Mashiach Tzidkeinu, B'Meheira V'Yameinu Mamash.